Hey guys, welcome to Juicy Tea, where I read out the best stories on Reddit, so you don't have to. The funny, shocking, and satisfyingly juicy. Today's Crazy Karen Tuesday, where we encounter Karens in the wild. Our first story comes from the Petty Revenge subreddit, posted by Mallet Fists. You and your mate want to hold up 2 lanes of traffic? Don't post your business details on your back window. Just read something similar and got nothing to do, so thought I'd post my story. Driving along the Western Highway towards Milton, and there was an unusual amount of traffic. It was moving very slowly. Back then, my ex and I owned a play centre and a cafe. We'd close at 4, out by 5, and then head home. Traffic was always bad, as it's a 2-lane road with thousands of people on it, so a 20-minute drive in the morning was a 40 to 50-minute drive home. The road also changes speed from 100 to 90 to 110 kilometers an hour, and you'd often get people who would stick to 90 after it's changed to 110. This day, I was making my way through the traffic, but everyone was doing 50 to 60 the whole way. After about 40 minutes, I wasn't even halfway home, but I'd gotten close to the front so I could see the road was clear ahead. But there was these 2 a-holes driving side by side. I could clearly see the driver in the left lane, talking to the one in the right, having a laugh, waving and pointing behind him and laughing again. I saw effing red. These a-holes seemed to be making a game out of holding up thousands of commuters. I considered going around them using the breakdown lanes, but I didn't want to sideswipe either of them or hit the gravel and lose control. Then I noticed the business details on the back window of the guy on the right. Phone number, email, Instagram, website, you name it, he had it. I took a picture of it for later, and then I called him. Hey mate, is this blah blah from So Painting? That's me, how can I help? Well, I was just driving and I got your number from your back window. You looking for a quote? No, I'm looking for you and your effing mate to stop effing talking to each other on the effing highway while holding up all the effing traffic. I'm the C behind you. Move your effing car. He must have sped off at 200 k's an hour, and so did his mate. I went to a mate's place near my house, filled him in, and he grabbed the business details. We shared them with a ton of our friends, who prank called him, signed up his email for all sorts of weird stuff, found his socials, and posted lies about how they were treated when they used his services, and that he's a shady tradie. Moral of the story? Hold up thousands of people for laughs while displaying your business details, and you'll get what's coming to you. Our next post comes from the MaliciousCompliance subreddit, posted by Skyraker Beyond. No can do, they said everyone. This happened to me a few years back. I was down in Georgia, camping for spring vacation, and happened to be wearing a very nice red polo shirt. I wandered into Target to pick up a few gifts for my family back up in Canada. While perusing the back shelves, a stressed-looking manager runs up to me and tells me to get in the back. I tried to tell him, hey, I don't work here, but he interrupts me and says, I don't care what you're doing, get in the back, and basically drags me into the back area and over to one of the office conference rooms for a presentation from a regional executive. There was a lot of people in that office. It seemed like Target had called in everyone who would normally be off shift into the office for this meeting. So they had a lot of people that some managers had never interacted with before. I'm guessing that's why I got dragged in. It was very obvious to me that everyone I made eye contact with knew I didn't work there, since they all were laughing at my bewildered, what the F am I doing here look? Am I wearing the wrong pants? And then the executive rolled in and ran an hour-long presentation about some variety of performance metrics and some new fast business action plan or something that I tuned out. I probably could have left if I actually made a real effort, but it would have caused a real stink and definitely made the store manager look inept in front of their big boss. I'm not that much of an a-hole. Also, the meeting was catered, so I took full advantage of the free lunch. After it was done, we all filed out and I headed off to buy my purchases. The cashier glanced at my shirt and gave me the employee discount. Edit. Just to clarify, I was being Canadian when I said I was dragged. The manager didn't physically drag me. He glared at me and kept me hurrying up, so I was bound by social convention to follow him and see whatever this hilarity was going to lead to. Oh, of course! He's Canadian! This whole story makes sense now. Our next story comes from the Petty Revenge subreddit, posted by OKBeaselBob666. Entitled neighbour was being an a-hole about street parking, ends up having a chat with the authorities. About 13 years ago, we had a new neighbour who had the attitude that what was his and what was yours was his, especially the parking on the road near the front of his house. The road was a short dead end and had public parking. Now, the issue is our driveway was single wide and plenty long enough for 2 cars. I sometimes parked one vehicle on the road during the day so that my wife and I could easily get in and out without having to switch the cars around. The neighbour would come out and get in my face for parking on his property. The bylaw enforcement was a friend of his and would not do anything. Now this a-hole was also claiming a back injury and claiming disability. Yet he was perfectly capable of building a fence, large rock gardens and a koi pond. Beside his garden, he is proudly growing some devilweed at the back of his yard beside his garage and bragging about it. It wasn't visible from the road, but very visible from my yard. I quietly waited until the plants were quite large, towards the end of growing season. The next time he got in my face, I quietly called the authorities to report the grow-up and said that I was uncomfortable with his criminal behaviour. I went out for a short while and came back to several police cars in his driveway and all his plants ripped out as Exhibit A. He never got in my face again, and we ended up moving away for work shortly afterwards. I heard he lost the house within a year and disappeared. Why'd you stop there? You could have been extra petty and taken pictures of him doing back-breaking labour while on disability and sent in the evidence of the fraud. That's where I thought this was going. Our next story comes from the Entitled People subreddit, posted by Big Temperature 7864. Mum wanted me to reposition her daughter's piercing after I put it in. I work for the Claires at my local mall, and this one girl, who was about 19 or so, came in wanting to get her second holes for her lobes, and one of her first holes re-pierced. No worries, I do that stuff all the time, it's literally my job. Her sister was hanging out next to us, and eventually their mum came up to chill as well, and watched her daughter get pierced. I drew all the dots on the girl's ears, and we're all fine. Until her mum suddenly interjects and complains about the dot placement, even though her adult daughter already confirmed what she wanted, and makes me readjust the dots for a few seconds. No worries, it wasn't a big adjustment. I end up doing her left ear, and as I'm switching to the other machine, her mum interjects again and starts complaining, saying the earring should be higher and asking if I can move it. I have to explain to her, no, the earring is in and moving it or taking it out right away can be really bad. The sister luckily jumps in and says everything looks really good, so we finish up and I get them checked out. I honestly don't understand parents who think they need to comment on their kids' choices, especially when they're adults. Our next story comes from the Entitled People subreddit, posted by Arisa Lee. Entitled friend F's around and finds out. I have known Coletta for over a decade. She has kids from a previous relationship and is one of those obnoxious parents, the kind who honestly believe that her toddlers are perfectly behaved angels who can be taken anywhere and never cause any upset. She's completely delusional and thinks that her kids never cry or have emotions other than sunshine and maturity beyond their years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but kids who are like that tend to be that way due to fear of consequences. Painful consequences. Coletta isn't the greatest human, but she also doesn't abuse her kids. She's actually on the other end of the spectrum and spoils them rotten. Earlier this year, she married a single dad. This put strain on our relationship because I wouldn't listen to her badmouth her stepson, who I'll call Caleb, aged 7 years old. Caleb is on the spectrum and has some issues with impulse control and emotional regulation. He's in therapy for that, but Coletta hates him regardless. I could endure listening to her delusions about how perfect she thinks her kids are, but shut down her for the nasty things she tries to say about Caleb. What remained of our friendship broke entirely a few months ago. That was when Caleb's mum said she needed a break and his dad needed to step up. Coletta lost her mind. I'll let your imagination fill the blanks with all the ableist and hateful trash she vomited. I told her she should have known this was a possibility. Isn't it obvious that if you date someone with minor children, they could become a full-time responsibility? Coletta screamed that of course she knew, but that only applied if Caleb's mum died. It wasn't fair that she ruined Coletta's fairy tale romance where her new husband stepped in as dad for her kids, and Caleb was someone else's problem. I heard through the grapevine that Coletta is getting divorced. Apparently, she told her husband that her kids are perfect and his isn't, and he has to choose the better family that they created, her 2 kids, and him, or the out-of-control brat that even his ex didn't want anymore. He chose Caleb. Knowing Coletta, she's probably angry at everyone but the person who actually caused the mess, herself. Our last story comes from the Petty Revenge subreddit. Posted by a legit Android May. Neighbour kept hogging the shared garden, so I kept his Wi-Fi hostage until he moved out. A few years ago, my girlfriend and I lived in a small building with only a handful of apartments and a tiny garden that we shared with the rest of the residents. My neighbour was this guy that everyone hated, constantly blaring music, leaving trash in front of his door, loud drunken grill parties all weekend, every weekend, and ignoring all requests to keep it down, citing his rights to be loud. You know the one. Our window had a direct view of the garden where he hosted these grill parties, and one day I noticed he had a similar sound system to ours. It required no authentication for a Bluetooth connection, so I wrote a program that would connect his speakers the moment he turned them on and played the same 15 seconds of gay porn sounds on repeat. He kept taking the speakers to service, which obviously didn't help, so he bought a new set. His new sound system could connect to Wi-Fi. Since he made the mistake of loudly announcing his Wi-Fi password to his guests regularly, I connected to it. I realized he never changed the default router password, and wrote another program that connected automatically and kept rotating his admin password. I even set up my old laptop to run this program continuously. It also kept streaming gay porn to his TV at random intervals, printed a luscious dick pic whenever his printer came online, and either abruptly changed the volume of his speakers every 47 minutes, or kept subtly increasing and decreasing it throughout several hours. I saw people from our ISP at his apartment several times trying to fix his network, but to no avail. The moment they reset his password, my program was there, changing the admin password. After about 3 months of this, they gave him a new router and a new password, which he never changed, and promptly announced to his friends the following weekend. Instead of him blaring his usual music, we listened to him yell and smash kitchenware for the last few weeks before he finally moved out. It was like music to our ears. Remember, I post new content every day, so subscribe for more juicy tea.